Yo, you wanna play some League?
Sure, but I'm about to infect Iceland. That country is impossible to infect.
Damn, are you getting sick?
Yeah, I think so. I ate some of that delicious bread from that fresh new grain shipment. It was pretty good.
I guess they got to you first.
Huh? What does that mean? Doesn't matter. I guess I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, but still pretty fine, so let's play some League.
Nice. Nice.
Unholy is one of the 3 talent trees for Death Knights. If you've ever played any PvP, I'm sure that you're well accustomed to their freaking death grips. God, that death grip is a pain in my ass. But in PvE they are also very good. In fact, they are so good that they are mandatory for fights that have any kind of area of effect, because they will provide a significant magical damage increase on targets with the Death Knight's diseases on them. And Pestilence allows you to disease pretty much everyone in your vicinity. In fact, I'd say they are more prominent in endgame raids than Frost Death Knights because of the Ebon Plaguebringer talent, making them the best DPS spec for a Death Knight in PvE. I wouldn't go as far as putting them in the top 5 DPS classes, but they are for sure in the top 10. Now that you know that they are good, let's take a detailed look at what makes them good and, more importantly, how to play it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Unholy Death Knight guide for 3.3.5a, more specifically for Warmanes 3.3.5a. Let's start off with the talent tree. There is only one talent tree that will work in PvE, and this is the one. You'll subspec into the Frost tree to get the free interrupt from Endless Winter. Next up is the Unholy tree. There are so many fun talents to take here, but you simply don't have the points to spend on them. This is the best talent tree that you can have. Morbidity is often something that people will take, because aside from the damage on Death Coil, which Unholy Blight will also give, Morbidity will also lower the cooldown on Death and Decay. That, however, is completely useless in Wrath of the Lich King endgame content. Unholy Blight will do roughly 7 to 9% of all your Death Coil's damage, making 1 point into this better than 1 point into Morbidity. Reaping is also called into question sometimes. I've never been able to make a talent tree with Reaping work. I think it overcomplicates the rotation, and we don't have the talent points to waste on Reaping, since literally everything else has more value than Reaping. I can confidently and comfortably tell you to copy this talent tree setup and you will have the best one in the business. As far as glyphs are concerned, you'll want to have Glyph of Icy Touch, Glyph of Dark Death and Glyph of the Ghoul for single target fights. For the Ruby Sanctum 25 Heroic specifically, you can take the Glyph of Death and Decay instead of Glyph of the Ghoul. Since area of effect is so prominent in the Ruby Sanctum 25 Heroic, you'll get a bunch of extra damage because of this glyph. Professions should be engineering for nitro boost and the hyperspeed accelerated gloves so that you can proc Bloodcake Blade and Necrosis more often and give that significant haste buff to your gargoyle. And of course get jewel crafting for them big mama gems. Speaking of gems. Now here is something interesting for the Unholy Death Knight. Usually I'll just tell you to get the hit rating and the expertise cap and move on to the next priority. However, there are some Unholy Death Knights who don't like expertise. Their reasoning is that if you get dodged or parried, you'll still gain some runic power. Since the spell misses, you'll get your runes refunded, and they think that that is stonks going up. We'll talk about the many gaps in the Unholy rotation later. For now I'd like to say that me personally, I do like expertise on the Unholy Death Knight. Sure, it will take away a few strength gems, but in my experience, consistency is more important. Imagine your first 3 or more plague strikes getting dodged or parried. Yeah, good luck dealing damage then. The only thing you're dealing then is stonks going down. So, as always, cap your hit rating and expertise. 8% hit rating, 26 expertise, 7% hit rating if you have a Draenei in your group. Then it becomes real simple. You want to have as much strength as possible. Whip out your mother's credit card, go to the Dalaran auction house because of course you have engineering and you can use the auction house in Dalaran and get yourself a whole bunch of bold cardinal rubies, and I mean a lot of bold cardinal rubies. But not only bold cardinal rubies. If you have a +6 strength socket bonus available to you, you can use a 10 strength and 10 haste gem on the yellow sockets. These will make it so that you proc necrosis and bloodcake blade more often. Also get at least one nightmare stare to activate your relentless Earthsiege diamond. Macros. All of our usual macros are here today. The start attack and cancel aura, hand of protection and divine intervention are omnipresent in all of our auto attacking classes. Make sure that you also have /pet attack on at least one of your spells that you'll open up with. This way you won't have to worry about your pet being a reanimated slacker. Because I like to compartmentalize, I also like this handy area of effect macro. Besides those macros, you will always have the useful mouse over macros. Be careful with these. If you death grip or taunt Helion instead of a living ember, you'll end up wiping the entire raid group and getting a fat -50 DKP. Now onto some add-ons. The usual applies here. Raid frames for all of the information that you will need on the raid, which honestly, it's not that much on an Unholy Death Knight. You could use it to see if and when a tank dies. You can then pop some cooldowns and tank the boss for a little bit. Need to Know is back in all of its glory, baby, and you'll want to keep good track of your diseases with this or any add-on similar to it. Diseases have to be reset every 3rd rotation of runes if you are following the simple single target rotation. Feel free to refresh them when your runes come off cooldown in order to keep the rotation rolling. On a Feral Druid, it is a cardinal crime if you refresh, rip or rake before it falls off. On an Unholy Death Knight, it's quite alright. Energy is gonna work differently than runes. Besides those two add-ons, just make sure that you have a UI that you are comfortable with. There really aren't that many add-ons you need to have on an Unholy Death Knight. So without any further ado. Death, famine, pestilence, war. These are all of the things you'll find in a comic book about apocalypse. In our case, we'll only need 3 of the 4. Death, famine, war. War, because that is what PvE is. A war against the raid boss, a war against yourself, a war against your friends. Famine is what we'll need to provide to our mistakes. The fewer the better. Death is what we are. It is what we bring upon any pixel stupid enough to stand in front of us. Flask up. DBM pull 15. Make sure your ghoul is summoned and that you have a fresh application of bone armor. DBM pull 10. 9. Use Army of the Dead. Your runes will need time to replenish even if the cast is only 4 to 5 seconds. DBM pull 5. Deep breath and use Death and Decay on the ground if it's a role-playing boss such as Deathbringer Sourfang or the Lich King. DBM pull 3. DBM pull 2. 1. Pre-pot a potion of haste, and if the boss fight doesn't need nitro boosts, use them to close the distance faster. DBM pull now. Get into melee attack range as fast as you unhumanly can. Icy Touch has a bit of a range on it, so use it as soon as you're allowed to. Once you're in the melee range and Icy Touch has been put on the boss, use Plague Strike so you'll have both of your diseases on the boss. Next up is a Blood Strike. You'll want to get Desolation effect up as soon as possible. This will increase our damage output by 5%. Now do a Scourge Strike and one more Blood Strike. Quickly use Empowered Rune Weapon as soon as you can to reset them runes. With our refreshed runes, quickly use a double Scourge Strike. This will put our Sigil of the Hanged Man on 3 out of 3 stacks. This means that our Gargoyle will now get the maximum benefit of both our trinkets and our Sigil. Use the Gargoyle now. Then it's time for a Blood Strike, Death Coil, Blood Strike, Death Coil. In my experience, I've always found that DCBS is better than double Blood Strike into double Death Coil. Perhaps it has something to do with the Unholy Blight timing. That's pretty much it for the opening rotation. From this point on, you'll want to follow the priority list of keeping your diseases up, keeping Desolation up, using Scourge Strike when both of the above requirements are met. Whenever there is a hole in your rotation, and trust me, this will happen, first use Horn of the Winter. This will generate runic power for you. If there is a hole in your rotation and Horn of the Winter is on cooldown, you can use a last ditch effort in Rune Tap Bone Armor. Just keep in mind that you are now playing with a death rune. This can overcomplicate the simple rotation. If a boss has some roleplay like the Deathbringer Sourfang or the Lich King, you'll want to start with a Blood Strike instead of an Icy Touch. That way Desolation can proc earlier and you'll do a little bit more damage. That's it for the Unholy Death Knight rotation and priority list. It's not that crazy hard. It does deal a lot of damage and it will feel rewarding, not as much as the Frost Death Knight though. Maybe we'll cover that someday too. So utility, let's see, full plate armor, yeah, check, Shadowmourne, check, we're not a paladin, check. What in the heck is there to talk about really? Well, let's think real good. Like I said before, you can tank fairly decently with all of your defensive cooldowns up. Bone armor is also going to contribute to your tankiness, albeit for only 3 hits. If the tank dies and you need to buy some time for that precious battle rest, take it upon yourself to taunt the boss with all of your cooldowns up. This might just save your raid from wiping. Don't forget to reapply the Horn of Winter in case somebody like gets battle rest or whatever, just, you know, keep it up. In the Ruby Sanctum 25 Heroic, you can also be an absolute unit when it comes to taking living embers from the main tank. If they are left to grow, they'll be more and more of an issue. Path of Frost can be used in a very specific situations, such as Saviana Ragefire, in order to help the group damage her just a little bit more. We are really scratching the bottom of the barrel here, but Raise Ally, I guess. It can be used in a pinch if there's no more battle rests left. The Raised Ghoul won't deal a lot of damage, but hey, every little bit is a little bit. And who doesn't love being a ghouly boy? I think I'm getting sick though. Now for some juicy tips and tricks. Yeah, I actually don't feel that good. So I think I'll just like skip the tips and tricks and like finish the video. Oh, that really doesn't make me feel any better, but hey, tips and tricks. I'll use my sickened mind to come up with some. Okay, let's see. A nice trick is combining your second potion of speed with your second gargoyle. You can even combine this with at least one trinket proc for maximum efficiency. Keep in mind that you have the strongest slow in the entire game, at least for the first 1 or 2 seconds. Chains of Ice might not fully slow the Valkyr, as their maximum slow is capped at 50%, but the Shambling Horror basically becomes a slug-ass motherfucker, allowing your off-tank on the Lich King fight to easily walk away from it. If you're walking away from the Lich King when he enters his transition phase and you got runes plenty, you can drop a nice Death and Decay in the center of the platform. This will hurt Lich King just a little bit. A big tip is to use Anti-Magic Shell for runic power gain. Not only does it make you practically immortal to mechanics such as Sindragosa's Blistering Cold or the Malleable Goo, since the Anti-Magic Shell will prevent harmful magical effects from landing on you, and it will also eat up a whole bunch of magical damage, and it will grant you runic power for the amount of damage absorbed. You could combine this with a Cancel Aura Power Word Shield macro in order to make sure your Anti-Magic Shell gives back as much runic power as possible. We've already talked a little bit about the Raised Ally, but did you know you can also Death Pact with it, huh? If you find yourself on low health and the healers are struggling to keep people alive, you could substitute a Scourge Strike for a Death Strike. This will grant you a 10% of your health back if both of your diseases are applied on the target. Oh, all this talk about diseases. And man, if Arthas sees me right now, he'd purge me so fast you wouldn't be able to say, "Watch your tone with me, boy. You may be the prince, but I am." Oh, I don't feel so good. It's like the day after drinking too much rakia, but it's actually like worse. Oh man. Well, let's just take off early and go home. I need some rest.
For Lord Oran.
Oh, hey Arthas. Love your father. Great ruler. What's up, my dog?
You are past redemption.
Fuck. What's up, guys? I'm dead now. Hope you've learned something from the guide and that you at least mildly enjoyed it. I'ma thank you for watching and head out. Peace. Flask up, make sure that your ghoul is summoned and that you have a fresh application of Bone Armor. In my experience, I've always found that DCBC. If you find yourself on low health and the healers are struggling to keep people alive, you could fuck.